Hey guys, welcome back to the World Religions series. Today we will be covering the Christian cult Jehovah's Witness. We will be talking about the history of this belief system and then looking into how it answers those four main questions that all religions are attempting to answer, which is origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. So basically, where did we come from? What is the meaning of life? Where do we get our sense of morality? And where are we going when we die? And then, as always, if you are benefiting from these videos, please like and subscribe. The more engagement that you give these videos, the more likely it is to reach more people. And the goal of my channel and my heart is to just help people think intellectually about their faith and why they're believing what they're believing. So let's jump in. Jehovah's Witness. Kind of similar to Mormonism, I think that a lot of people are under the assumption that the Jehovah's Witnesses are just another sect of Christianity, when actually it is a Christian cult. So let's look at first the history of Jehovah's Witness. So Jehovah's Witness was founded by a man named Charles Taze Russell, and he taught that Christ had returned invisibly in 1894 and that he would return again to establish his visible kingdom in 1914. However, 1914 came and went and nothing happened. 2 years later, Charles dies. Then, a man named Joseph Rutherford took over, and he taught that the invisible reign of Christ began in 1914 rather than ended, and then that Jesus would arise physically in 1925. 1925 came and went, nothing happened, and he dies. So then Nathan Moore takes over, and Nathan Moore is the one who very much so enlarges their training programs, and under him is when the New World Translation of the Bible is released. So when we are talking about biblical translations, there are over 400 some English translations of the Bible. And I think a lot of people are under the impression that because there are so many different translations, that means that there's that many different versions of the Bible, or all these translations are teaching different things, when really this is not the case. However, with the case of the New World Translation, it actually is changing the meaning of the verses to a point where Christian doctrine is altered, which ultimately leads the Jehovah's Witnesses to not be considered Christian. For example, the Jehovah's Witnesses do not believe that Christ was divine, so any verses that might hint to his divinity would be altered in the New World Translation. Also, another thing they did is they added the word Jehovah in the place of God in the New Testament because they would understand Jehovah as the one and only God. So that's a little bit about the New World Translation. It is a translation that is altering the message of Christ, whereas the other translations that we have are not altering the message. They're altering the type of English they're using, essentially, at its simplest form. So yes, under Nathan Moore, the training programs become very popularized, and then the New World Translation comes out. But also, Nathan taught that Christ would return in 1975. And again, 1975 came and went, and nothing happened. So after this failed, Jehovah's Witnesses really shifted away from predictive dates, and they kind of came out with excuses as to why these things didn't happen. And what's important to know about Jehovah's Witnesses followers is that they are very much so encouraged not to ever question leadership. So that may be one of the reasons why all these failed predictions maybe aren't super problematic, is the followers are really encouraged not to question things. Another thing with the Jehovah's Witness is they are not encouraged to do independent Bible studies. So these are Bible studies where you are studying the word for yourself and you are trying to extract the meaning by yourself. Instead, they very much so encourage dependent Bible studies, and these Bible studies would be based off of the teachings and the practices that come out of what is called the Watchtower Society. And we'll get to that in a little bit. So first off, let's start off with some beliefs. What do they believe? They believe in the existence of only one God whose name is Jehovah, and they reject the doctrine of the Trinity. When it comes to the person of Jesus, they believe that Jesus is the first and greatest creation of Jehovah, and he is the Son of God, but he's not divine in any way. And then when it comes to Jesus' death and resurrection, they would say he wasn't crucified on a cross, he died on a stake, and that when he resurrected, he only resurrected spiritually, not physically. And then as for the forgiveness of sins, Jesus' death on the stake only covered the sins of Adam, not all of humanity. So, right off the bat, we are getting complete rejection of Orthodox Christianity, which is God is one and it is the Trinitarian God, that Jesus is divine, and that his death and resurrection atoned for the sins of all humanity. They would reject all of this. And so, this is why they cannot be considered Christian. So, then the question becomes, if Jesus' death and resurrection only pertains to the sin of Adam, how would humanity attain salvation or attain forgiveness? And within the Jehovah's Witness view, salvation would be earned through adherence to Watchtower teachings and practices. So now we'll get into what is Watchtower. So the Watchtower Society is basically a nonprofit organization, and this organization basically puts out like Jehovah's Witness sources, and pretty much everything about the Jehovah's Witness faith kind of like filters through the Watchtower Society. So the Watchtower Society will be producing a lot of educational sources and trainings for Jehovah's Witness followers. It's also publishing the New World Translation Bibles. They also produce things like magazines, pamphlets, tracts that will be given out and spread by the Jehovah's Witnesses. So basically, all of the Jehovah's Witnesses' beliefs will look back onto what the Watchtower Society is saying and producing. And then, as we just saw, the way you earn salvation is by obeying the Watchtower Society's teachings and practices. So let's start to answer those four main questions, because I think we've already kind of gotten into it. Origin. So Jehovah's Witnesses do believe that God created the world and also God created man. Meaning. They would say the meaning of life is to attain ultimate salvation, which we'll talk about what that is a little bit later. Morality, ultimately, they're getting their morality from the New World Translation of the Bible and the Watchtower Society. And destiny. So Jehovah's Witness view on the afterlife is a little different. They only believe in a spiritual resurrection because Jesus didn't resurrect physically, neither will humans. And then they believe that salvation is only available to 144,000 individuals who are considered the anointed ones. And actually, those 144,000 spots are already completely full. So, why become a Jehovah's Witness if you won't be able to be saved or become an anointed one? Well, for the rest of humanity, or for the rest of the Jehovah's Witnesses, they will not enter into heaven with God, but rather they will experience an earthly paradise. So there's still some incentive to believe in God, because then you still get this earthly paradise. But as for the 144,000 that actually get to be with God in heaven, those spots are already taken. As for those who do not believe in Jehovah's Witness, they don't believe in hell, but actually they believe in annihilation, which basically just means that the soul ceases to exist. Some other identifiers of a Jehovah's Witness, or things that they are known for, is the fact that they don't celebrate holidays or birthdays, because they would see that as honoring someone or something other than God. Another thing is they don't participate in any sort of blood transfusion. And I think this comes from the idea in the Bible that the life of a human is in their blood. I'm not sure about that. That's just the only place off the top of my head that I could see them getting that concept from. And now finally, where did they get it right and where did they get it wrong? Well, similarly to the Mormons, I think they're really good at missions. They take missions very seriously, and I think that's something we can learn from them. But where they get it wrong is they do reject all core doctrine of Christianity. And ultimately, they have the markers of a Christian cult. What are those markers? It is that they have an extra book besides the Bible, they have centralized power or a specific leader, and there's lots of shame around leaving the community. Jehovah's Witnesses technically don't have an extra book, but they are translating the Bible in a way that alters the core message and denies core doctrine. They do follow a centralized power or leader. So initially it was Charles Taze Russell, but now it is the Watchtower organization. Remember, all of their beliefs flow through that organization. And then finally, there's shame and fear associated with leaving. So it is a big deal to leave the Jehovah's Witness group. So that's a very brief overview of the Jehovah's Witness Christian cult, and I would encourage you, if you are interested, to go study it more for yourself because that was just scraping the surface. Remember to like and subscribe.